Are you okay?
Yeah. I'm good. I'm good.
Hello. Welcome to Colony House. This is Review Boys.
Did you know that they were originally going to be called Caleb after the main
Yes.
guy's name?
Yeah, I read
thought
that.
that was so funny. I'm
That's
glad
pretty
they
funny.
went with something other than
Yeah, Colony
Caleb.
House is very relatable. It's such a good Christian name. As is Caleb. Caleb is a very good Christian name. But Colony House.
Are they Christian?
What, Colony House?
Yeah.
Yeah. Caleb and Will, the two brothers that lead it, they're Stephen Curtis Chapman's children.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's
Well, that makes
pretty
sense.
cool. So yes, they are Christian, and they have lots of Christian elements in their music. And in fact, I've always enjoyed Colony House. I saw them in concert in 2014 with Switchfoot and Need to Breathe and Drew Holcomb.
I saw that they toured with those guys.
Yes, they toured with those guys, and that's where they got, a lot of their fame, and I think a lot of their fan base comes from those same fans of Switchfoot and Need to Breathe, the sort of alternative Christian rock sort of group. But they really have had their own unique sound in a lot of ways. But I think because of their fan base, they've always had to struggle with writing music that's both adventurous and pleasing to their existing audience. But I've always been a longtime fan of Colony House. When I was younger, was a fantastic album, really good silhouettes. That's where they really busted onto the scene and gained a lot of their fame. And then they signed on to RCA for their second album, which I think a lot of people didn't necessarily love. And now they're back on. I think they had the same producer from when I was younger on this album, so it's more of that vibe. But I think they still. But there's a lot of those images on this album about what is our identity, because they don't know. They're kind of still becoming their own band, but they really have been in multiple years, playing on like late night shows and touring by themselves rather than opening for other acts. So it's really great to see them release this album that's pretty standalone, pretty its own narrative. Not that it wasn't like that before, but it's definitely more of a narrative than I think their previous albums, and it ties a lot of ideas, what they're going through right now, into that, which I enjoy. What were your thoughts coming into this album?
Yeah, so I had actually not heard of Colony House yet, but Ethan said that they would be kind of close to Coin, which was the band we thought we were reviewing this week, but that album's not coming out until February. So I was little to no expectations, trying to be open minded, and I was mostly pleasantly surprised. It wasn't quite what they weren't as similar to Coin as I was expected. But they mostly kind of reminded me of like stuff I would listen to as a kid when I was younger, like alt rock stuff. Obviously, like once I read that they were like touring with Switchfoot, I felt like that connection made sense to me. And almost like maybe Skillet, but not quite. Like with the whole strings kind of playing with next to guitars. The guitar obviously is quite as similar, and their ability to keep everything really entertaining and like not boring. Everything was new ideas happening, whether that be through instrumentation.
I think in some instances on this album, they definitely wear their influences on their sleeve. They certainly sound like Switchfoot on certain tracks, especially the closer, or a few sprinkled in there that's more organic rock, not necessarily new Switchfoot, and also kind of hints of the Killers, especially vocally.
I guess the last thing I would say, like in general, is like how everything felt pretty big. Like a lot of the songs were very passionate, and I think they succeeded a lot of times, which was like my favorite element, because they were trying to get big and they did that through instrumentation and builds and stuff. So that was like a big plus for me on this album.
It was very cinematic at times, I would say, especially with added strings or synth layers.
Yeah.
Especially the elements of the tracks in between, the Mr. Runaway sort of 1, 2, and 3,
Yeah.
kind of add a bit of like these are little interludes that we kind of introduce these ideas or little bits of wisdom that kind of contribute to the album's message as a whole.
Yeah, so lyrically, I felt like the Mr. Runaway interludes, is that what they were called? I felt like they were a really good narrative device that helped them kind of plan out their story and like connect things in a way that worked. I guess I was a little confused about the third one though. I kind of expected it to like wrap things up. But it like so the first Mr. Runaway talked about how love isn't enough sometimes and how it's kind of inadequate. The second one talked about how love is a compass. So I think he was kind of realizing, okay, love doesn't always work, but it's better than following a lie, which is what he had been doing. And then the third, I kind of expected there to be another thing about love or something to finish there, but I was unsure what he was saying. So the last song resolved things really well. It landed on this message of hope that was really convincing and inspiring. And I personally can't wait to like sit with this album more and see how I react to it once it settles more, basically. So
yeah. I know the Mr. Runaway is a reference to, I believe, Will and Caleb's grandpa or maybe great grandpa who just left their family.
Oh, really?
Like, just left.
Wow.
Like left everything behind. And I think this album is partially about that, and those Mr. Runaways are like, it's not really supposed to necessarily have this resolve. The very last song is, I think, them attempting to make resolve.
Yeah, it's not like, oh, we figured it all out, but it's a message of hope of like, even though we don't have all the answers, we can still, have hope, which is, really inspiring. And like you said, it came about from the story of the grandfather, which makes sense to me because there's a lot of references to home and one song in particular, Where I'm From, that's the one. So, this album is very personal, very heartfelt, and I could tell a lot of intent went to the lyrical content.
My only criticism with the lyrics is that I wish at times they were more explicit, like especially on Mr. Runaway. Like, I never would have known that except that I had to look that up and everything that it's about this thing. And I think some of the lyrics just some of them hit really hard and they're really powerful. Other ones are really generic. I especially love the lyric from the Hope Inside at the very end, where it says, "Maybe there's a reason why this world spins in circles."
Yeah,
like I'm going, it's giving us another try every sunrise. I find purpose.
Yeah, no, I love that.
Okay, go ahead.
My only complaint about the lyrics is that sometimes the hooks could get a little too repetitive. For example, El Capitan was overall a pretty groovy, enjoyable song.
I disagree, but keep going.
You didn't like it at all?
No.
But yeah, the hook was just kind of like El Capitan over and over again, for the most part. There was a couple other songs.
I didn't quite get the message of that song either. I think at the same time he was trying to make a social critique, but then also being like, "I would climb Mount Capitan for you," or what? I don't know. Maybe I just I think there were some lines that I think were confusing or the lyrics weren't explicit enough. Yeah. I don't think. Should we start going through the track list? Because I know there's definitely some discrepancies on. You said you liked like the first few tracks.
I was like, I was kind of iffy, but I didn't have any specific ideas about why I didn't like it. I guess another general thing, I don't love his voice. He's a really good singer, and I think he has a really good performance on this album. There's a lot of, obviously it was a very emotional album, and you got all of that from his vocals. I just don't love the way his voice sounds, but I didn't want that to get in my way. Especially
there was Why Ever Try on that song. Especially it was like this really tender moment, and then he crushed it with like this really kind of crushed tone, which I guess is aesthetic choice. It kind of sounds like what's that band, Imagine Dragons or whatever, how it's just screaming like it's not. I still love your voice, Caleb. I think he has a good voice, but I think sometimes it kind of crushes the moment for me. But
I didn't notice it, but I really was just looking for him to stretch his vocals to really like end on a shout or something, and he did. So Yeah, so the first couple songs I thought were solid. I guess towards the end, my only like production or musical complaints were like, and we talked about this, we disagreed, how the instrumentation for me wasn't quite cohesive. Sometimes the instrument choices would not gel in my opinion. So for example, Julia had these kind of like lo-fi guitars, and then the vocals were like really heavy and like layered. Like he like probably layered a bunch of vocals, and they were super clear, and it just didn't like match aesthetically well with the lo-fi drum or the lo-fi guitars. And then there was like the bongo. It all just felt like a weird mash for me, and it didn't contribute to this like aesthetic that made sense with the song. So
I disagree firmly.
Firmly,
it is probably one of my favorite tracks on this album, simply for the production and the idea. It's so simple, but just this super fuzzy, distorted sort of guitar sound over these like bongo fills, and this like super warm synth and piano. It sounds kind of like a Vampire Weekend sort of song, especially when the piano kicks in, but it's still nothing like it. And I think it's their most creative track on this whole list, and I think it's awesome. But you can keep going.
We agree to disagree. And I felt the same way with Trying. They had like almost the piano they used on the song sounded a lot to me like the one they used on the Lumineers album. So it's almost like kind of folk-like to me.
Yeah.
And then they had this like arpeggiated synth.
Paired with this, yeah.
And it was just like an acoustic sound and a really like electronic sound, and it just didn't mesh well with me. So, but again, like a really cool build, and I liked his vocals screaming in the background. It was so passionate, so heartfelt.
Yes, that was definitely I think one of the more powerful tracks on this list, next to the Hope Inside.
Yeah, and I would say Why Even Try is probably one of the more emotionally powerful songs.
Another track I really liked was Take It Slow. I especially love the narrative on this track. The very first part's very like fast and like energetic, and like it's classic Colony House. It totally reminds me of when I was younger, and I love that. And then they hit this breakdown that sounds like something like from 21 Pilots or something like that. It was
so interesting.
And it was so good. It's been in my head all day. That was a fantastic track.
Yeah, I guess the only other comment I have about the music was like, I usually love strings. I'm usually like, oh yeah, someone put strings in. But I, for some reason, just didn't love their use of strings. They usually like went behind the guitars or something. And I've always struggled whenever guitars and strings go together. It's not my favorite combination. Electric guitars. Acoustic guitars and strings, I think, go super well. But electric guitars, obviously the timbre decisions you have are so wide. It's hard to find one that gels well with strings. But other than that, really strong narrative, really creative instrumentation decisions, and like building with the form and song structures. Overall really strong in my opinion. I feel like I kind of jumped ahead. Do you have any other thoughts?
The whole album?
Yeah.
I think narratively like I said, I think it should be a bit more explicit. And production wise, I think there were some times like original material or Where I'm From, where it just kind of didn't mesh well with me. I especially didn't really like the snapping sound and Where I'm From. It wasn't really my favorite. Some of their production choices did seem kind of like they're pandering to elements that they wouldn't usually include. And there were certain tracks I didn't like, El Capitan, that I didn't really like, but I still really appreciate, especially what they laid down at the latter half of this album. And I think it's great for them that they're exploring new sounds and
I really hope this album sticks with me. I'm gonna run back to it and definitely check out some of their older albums. So I think I'm a fan. I'm gonna give this a strong 7.
Oh, that's my number 2.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Second week in a row, man. We're on.
Yeah.
We're really
like
agreeing.
In sync this year.
Wait, I forgot I was supposed to count.
The thought of making myself fall out of my chair is so stupid.
Okay, try again.
Chair just like lean. Okay.
Which is one hard thing.
Something funny.
Wait, did I say El Capitan?
You said El Capitan.
El Capitan. El Capitan.
No.
I'll go with it.
Why would I? Do I look like geography is one of my passions?
It's not geography, it's rock climbing. Game.
Does rock climbing look like one of my passions?
Oh, also, I thought it was funny how they had, on When I Was Younger, they have a song called 220. And then on Only the Lonely, they have a song that's called 320. So I was expecting 420 on this track list, but they didn't put it there. I don't know why not.
That's hilarious.
Maybe next album.
I laughed way too hard at that.